Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I hope and pray that what I have to say will be of benefit to you. I'm sure you didn't come expecting to find a duck here today, but there may be a duck around that you will discover in the process. Or maybe you've already found it, possibly. Have you ever been divorced?
Sure.
Yep.
Downsized?
Yep.
No.
Disabled?
Yep.
Distraught?
Yep.
Depressed? Things you can't control?
All of the above.
All of the above. That's exactly right. I've been all of the above at least once before I reached the age of 42. Needless to say, I'm well beyond 42 now. What did I do about it? That's what I want to tell you. That's my story. Next slide. By the age of 42, I learned that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing repeatedly, but expecting different results. I'd even learned the danger of doubling down. That is, when in trouble, repeating what got me into trouble, but all the more intensively. You know anybody like that? So I realized that I had to stop doing certain things and give up the thinking that was behind my actions. I had to examine my behavior and my thinking to see what I had to change and what things I had to change, how to change them. A very wise person once observed about human behavior that no change occurs until the pain of changing is less than the pain of staying where you are. And actually, it's perceived pain. So no change occurs until the perceived pain of changing is less than the perceived pain of staying where you are. But it's perceived. It's all in your head. It's all, if you change your thinking, the perceptions will change and the changes will occur. So it's all about change your thinking, change your life, which of course is one of the major dictums of New Thought, which is the organization into which I was ordained. It is a process. It's not an event, so it takes some time. Next. So the process I chose was meditation. And like most people, I managed the pain by moving into it gradually, little by little, step by step, with the aid of a succession of teachers. Now, my first teacher was a black Baptist minister with a PhD from Harvard. And in 1978-79, there were very few black Baptist ministers with a PhD from Harvard. This was an exceptional man. He had, after he got this PhD, been a cultural attaché in the U.S. Embassy in what was then Burma, now Myanmar, however you pronounce it. And my wife took me off to a retreat house north of Baltimore for a class in meditation, which he taught. Meditation that he had learned during his time in Myanmar. Some years later, my wife and I were living and working in Tokyo, and we studied Raja Yoga, which is a meditation form, a mental form of yoga at a meditation center in Tokyo. And what I learned there was that meditating in a group helps. It's almost like there is a process of entrainment where you pick up on the vibrations of the group, and that helps lead you into your own meditation. If you're trying to do it alone and you start doing it all alone, it's pretty tough. So if you're still in the beginning stages, I suggest to find some friends, preferably some experienced meditators who can set up the right vibes, and then you can just sort of follow along and it'll work, it'll go. And then some years after that, about 2006 or so, my wife and I both went to a Vipassana meditation center. Vipassana, also called insight meditation. You may have seen the word from Jack Kornfield or Joseph Goldstein or Sharon Salzberg, who established centers in California and in Massachusetts way back in the 1970s. They brought it again from the same teacher that actually the Black Baptist minister got it from. In I'll call it Burma, because that's easier for me to say. Anyhow, they established centers, and then S.N. Gowinka, who died just a couple of years ago, an Indian citizen who also lived in Burma, began setting up Vipassana centers all over the world, to the point that they now exist in a couple hundred countries. There is one here in Washington State, down around Chehalis. I think the official name of the town is Ethel, Washington. I went to that one. My wife went to the one in California. In any case, it is a rough way to learn. The meditation is a 10-day sit in which you begin at 4:30 in the morning and you end at about 9 or 9:30 at night. And most of the time in between is in meditating, with a few breaks, with 2 meals only, breakfast and lunch. Beginners, they allow to have some tea late afternoon. And you don't speak. Noble silence is observed. You don't talk to anybody. You don't even exchange meaningful glances. No gestures, no nothing. You are there to look within, to look at yourself, and among other things, to scan your body and to listen to what your body is telling you. And if you become completely silent and shut down the brain, you will find that your body does begin telling you things. And then you can look at that and see what it means. Anyhow, that was tough. About the third or fourth day, I thought, I'm not going to make it. My wife had done it before me. Our daughter had done it before her. Our granddaughter, who is only now 21 years old, then she was almost 10 years younger, had done a teenage version of it. My daughter's boyfriend had done it, and so I would be shamed out of the family if I didn't. That also helps sometimes. So you might put your support system in place before you go undertake something like that. Anyhow, by the age of 62, I think I can remember back that far. I was 79 2 days ago. Meditation had become an essential part of my daily regimen. And my regimen consisted of getting up in the middle of the night, typically around 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, some people will say that the boundary, the veil between one reality and the other reality and the multiple realities that we exist in, that veil is thinnest at 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyhow, that's why I chose that time. And so I get up around 2 o'clock in the morning. It isn't always the same time, but about then I meditate for at least 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes more. And again, I don't try to set it by the clock. I try to go with where the Spirit takes me and what I have to do then. But I do it without fail. Come hell or high water, if you want to say, okay? It hasn't ever come to that, but that's my regimen. That's the one thing that I will do every day, no matter what, no matter where I am. And I begin to notice some things that happen in the silence. I begin to notice that occasionally there would be sounds coming from within the house where I was sitting. Maybe a particular piece of furniture would emit a crack, a squawk, or something in the heating system would go clunk, or whatever it would be, and so forth. But I begin to wonder, there was some correlation between what was going on in my meditation and the sounds that I got. I began to wonder whether God was trying in that way to send me a signal, as if to say, an exclamation point, to say, there, that thing that just went through your mind, you need to pay attention to that. Something like that. So I tried to go back and look at it some more. I tried to notice what I hadn't been noticing. At first I felt it was bizarre. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't even talk to my wife about it. I didn't talk to my spiritual counselor about it. I was a little ashamed. I thought maybe I was going slightly around the bend. But if so, I kept on going, and here I am. Anyhow, I decided when I began writing a novel at the age of 72, I decided to put it into my story. And so I depicted the interaction between the main character, Walter, and a pet duck. And Walter was also learning to meditate. And in my story, the way I wrote it in was that the duck would occasionally emit a quack. That Walter began to correlate between his thoughts in meditation and the sound of the quack. And so, as the story goes, there is this relationship that develops between Walter and the duck. Now, I should explain that my novel is intended to teach some things that I've learned about life. It's not just a novel. It's actually a self-help book in disguise. I've learned that many self-help books never get completely read. And so my trick was to write what I thought would be a somewhat interesting story that would draw you in and keep you reading even through the dull parts. Yes, there are some dull parts. Back to the next interesting part that would be of help to you, and with some hope that you would read all the way through to the end. And of course, the ending thing again is the quack of a duck, as you might expect. So that was the idea, was to make it an interesting story, and it turns out that people who have read the novel say that the duck is the most interesting character. I won't tell you any more than that. The book is here. If you want to buy a copy, that's fine. If you want to get it via the internet, that's fine too. There is even a version that I cannot bring and show you that a friend of mine has professionally recorded and narrated. So if you want to go on to the internet and to audiobooks, you will find 18-hour recording of the whole thing narrated, and it's again not exactly bedtime reading, but it is a relatively painless way to slog through it. Anyhow, I intended that the relationship between Walter and his duck would add a little comical note to the story and keep people going. So I did this in contrast also with another novel that was popular at the time, The Shack. And initially I was going to call my book The Quack. And then thought better of it. But the point is that if you've read The Shack or seen the movie for The Shack, you'll know that there's a good bit of supernatural stuff in there, some of which I found a little far-fetched. And so I tried again to keep everything in my story closer to what I like to say is normal reality, with the idea of convincing the reader that it could happen to you. Which means, among other things, you could find a duck too. And that's, again, part of the idea. Next. Then in 2011, I saw a film, A Dangerous Method. And have you seen that? It was a story about the interrelationship between Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, to the founders of modern-day psychotherapy. And in a particular scene in that movie, the two are sitting in Freud's study talking about something, when suddenly there is a loud crack emitted from a bookcase in the room. And Freud jumps on it right away and says, "There. That's a significant signal from some other part of reality, some other part of the universe. It has some meaning to us if we pay attention to it. It's a coincidence." The Unity Church in the Olympics Church, where Annette and I go, begins the service every week that you are not here by accident, that it's not a coincidence that you're there. That's the way they get the message across, begin things. So in any event, there ensues an argument between Jung and Freud over the crack in the meaning, and within a minute or so, Jung says there's going to be another one, and sure enough, there was another one, as a way of trying to again authenticate the message that there is something else going on besides the left side of the brain, and that if you make some effort, it will communicate with you, and maybe you can even get some meaning from it. So I realized I had stumbled onto something, a sort of unknown world between the worlds of left brain and right brain, if you will. And my duck, it was the go-between. And so the whole idea is that from this point on, my writing came very easy, and I was able to finish the novel, and as I say, the duck was the most popular part of the whole thing. Excellent. That's the end of my story. But now the question is, what does it mean? Excellent. Having noticed something new and received confirmation, I began reading in some other books and came across 2 books by Elaine Pagels. Some of you may know of her. She's a rather famous female theologian at the Princeton Theological Seminary, and she's most famous for her writings about the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospels that in part were rediscovered at the Nag Hammadi Library that was excavated in 1945. And so she's become a scholar of all of that and has written several books about it. So in reading through these 2 books, I came across a particular verse from the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is one of these Gospels which some would say is the basis for the four Gospels that we do have. Maybe not the Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Luke, and Mark, but at least for the Gospel of John. The idea being that John especially is a somewhat intuitive gospel, not really a historical gospel in that sense. And the whole Gnostic approach to religion, again, is very much intuitive. So, in my thinking about all of this, I came across in particular verse 70 of the Gospel of Thomas, which is, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Say it again. If you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. If you do not bring it forth, what is in there will destroy you. In a sense, that's your duck. Whatever is within you that God put there is what you have to go find, make contact with, and find some way of bringing it forth. That's what it's all about. And so the duck really is a symbol of that. I don't care whether it's a duck, whether it's the unity dove, whether it's a guardian angel, and it doesn't have to come through a noise in your house or the furniture or something. It can come any number of ways. The main point is look for it and notice what you don't notice. Things will, when you begin to look, things will appear into your life, and if you pay attention and to begin to make the correlations, what seemed to be a coincidence becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes part of your life. And then you can bring it forth. So in writing my novel, I was attempting to bring forth something, actually a lot of things, especially the duck. And so in writing my novel, I moved into Gnosticism, and I became what Pagels calls a disciple of my own mind. So she writes, the disciple who comes to know himself can discover then what even Jesus cannot teach, that his own mind is the father of truth. He learns what he needs to know by himself in meditative silence. Thus he considers himself equal to everyone, maintaining his own independence of anyone's authority. and he is patient with everyone. He makes himself equal to everyone, and he also separates himself from them. That may grate a little bit on some things you've taught, of the idea of being your own authority. This is the key point, at least in Gnostic teachings, is that ultimately what somebody else is teaching as the prescription for everyone doesn't work for everyone. You have to find your own savior, your own way, again, your own duck. Next. And again, Pagels emphasizes this point by quoting Sylvanus, who was an early teacher of, when was it? I didn't write it down. Early days of the church, probably about the 2nd century, I think. Whoever follows the direction of his own mind need not accept anyone else's advice. Have a great number of friends, but not counselors. If you acquire a friend, do not entrust yourself to him. Entrust yourself to God alone as Father and friend. This echoes also the admonition that you'll find in the Bible. Next slide. In Philippians it says, "So now work out your own salvation with anxious care, not only when I am with you, but all the more now that I am absent. Remember, it is God who, in his kindness, is at work within you, enabling you both to will and to work." Which is the same as the last words of the Buddha. Work out your own salvation with diligence. And it's a matter of then going within, finding your duck, finding what you really need to know. God will help you find it there. And you're not going to get it from somebody else, lock, stock, and barrel. You have to do some work yourself to get it there. So that's what it's all about. So Pagels pursues all of this into psychotherapy, especially Jungian psychotherapy, and explores the role of myth and symbols in achieving self-understanding. And again, it's pretty deep stuff. I don't have time to do any psychotherapy this morning. I don't think I could do it if I had to. But I will summarize what I have to say in 3 points. The duck in my story became my symbol for gnosis. Gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, a Greek word meaning knowledge, but knowledge in the sense of inner knowing. Right brain knowledge, not left brain knowledge. Self-knowledge and understanding. Every religion, in one way or another, teaches us to know thyself. That's the first step. So thanks to Pagels, my understanding has come to be that whoever achieves gnosis becomes no longer a Christian, but a Christ. And then unity would even add, not a Christ, but the Christ. And that's what it's all about. So my message to you is, find your duck. If you would like to take a couple minutes for meditation, let's do that. Pick a comfortable position. I don't believe in the full lotus position unless you are an adept at yoga, in which case full lotus will be comfortable. The idea is not to inflict pain on yourself during the meditation. So put yourself in a position that you can hold comfortably for about 5 minutes. Start with the words of the 3rd century Egyptian, Greek, Roman philosopher Plotinus. Withdraw into yourself and look. Look within, go completely quiet, empty your mind as much as you can. Your mind will not stay quiet very long. Thoughts will intrude and will dominate your attention if you let them. And again, the point is, don't let them. Let the thoughts wander on out the same way they wandered in. And then try to notice instead what otherwise you would not notice. Sounds, smells, tastes, Other bodily sensations such as itches, even small pains. Things that your thoughts would tend to obscure. Pay attention to the itches and the twitches and the sounds and the smells. Focus on each one until it passes away. If possible, don't scratch the itch, but focus on it, pay attention to it, and eventually it will go away of its own accord. In your succeeding days of meditation, try to sharpen your awareness so that you are noticing even more of what you formerly did not notice. And again, that's your duck telling you to pay attention to something that perhaps you didn't previously notice. And see if you can figure out what it's trying to tell you and how to bring that forth. And finally, remember the words of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. As soon as you learn to trust yourself, you will know how to live. Thank you.